My name is Jeanette, and I'm 34 years old. I was sitting in the hospital waiting room for my routine prenatal checkup, 28 weeks pregnant with our miracle baby. That's when I saw him. My husband Mark across the crowded lobby with another woman. She was visibly pregnant too. He was holding her hand, rubbing her belly with such tenderness. The same way he touched mine just this morning. My whole body froze. 7 years of marriage, and there he was, looking at her the way he looked at me. Before I continue this story about how I discovered my devoted husband's complete double life unraveling in the most public way possible, please let me know where you're watching from. And if you want to hear how this shocking betrayal turned into something neither of us expected, please subscribe to the channel. Mark and I met 8 years ago at a tech conference in San Francisco. I still remember walking into that massive convention center, feeling completely out of place among all those programmers and developers. I was there representing my marketing firm trying to network with potential clients. Mark was presenting something about cloud computing infrastructure. I didn't understand a word of his presentation, but I understood the way he smiled at me when we bumped into each other at the coffee station during break. He was different from the other tech guys. Sure, he had that slightly disheveled genius look they all seem to cultivate, but he could actually hold a conversation about something other than code. We talked for 3 hours that first day, missing half the conference sessions. He made me laugh with his stories about debugging disasters and teaching his mother how to use email. By the end of the week, we'd had dinner together 4 times. Long-distance dating between Seattle and San Francisco wasn't easy, but we made it work. Weekend flights became our routine. After 6 months, I knew this was it. When he proposed on a hiking trail overlooking the Golden Gate Bridge. I said yes before he even finished asking. The ring was perfect, simple, and elegant, just like the love I thought we shared. Our wedding in Napa Valley was everything I dreamed of. 200 guests gathered at a vineyard as the sun set over rolling hills, covered in grapevines. My father walked me down an aisle lined with white roses and baby's breath. Mark cried when he saw me in my dress. His vows made everyone tear up when he promised to be my partner, my best friend, my only love for all our days. I believed every word. We settled in suburban Seattle, buying a 4-bedroom colonial with a big backyard. Mark got promoted to senior software engineer at his company. I started my own marketing consultancy. Life was good, but something was missing. We both wanted children desperately. 3 years of trying took its toll. Month after month of disappointment. Temperature charts, ovulation tests, scheduled intimacy that felt anything but intimate. The fertility specialist diagnosed unexplained infertility, which somehow felt worse than having a specific problem to fix. We went through 3 rounds of IUI before moving to IVF. The hormone injections made me emotional and bloated. Mark gave me every shot, holding my hand through the discomfort. He came to every appointment, held my hand through every blood draw. When our first transfer failed, he held me while I sobbed for hours. The second transfer ended in miscarriage at 9 weeks. I wanted to give up, but Mark convinced me to try once more. When that third transfer finally worked, when we saw that strong heartbeat at 6 weeks, we both cried in the doctor's office. Mark kissed my forehead and whispered that I was the strongest woman he knew. He promised our baby would have the best life, the most loving home. We waited until 12 weeks to tell anyone afraid to jinx it. His excitement about the baby seemed genuine. Every weekend he worked on the nursery. He painted the walls soft yellow, assembled the crib with precision only an engineer could appreciate. He downloaded pregnancy apps and knew exactly what size fruit our baby matched each week. At 20 weeks, when we found out we were having a boy, Mark actually teared up again. He started a college fund that same day. But things started changing around month 5 of my pregnancy. His company suddenly needed him in their Portland office more often. Once a month became twice, then every other week. He said they were implementing a new system, and he was the only one who understood the architecture. I didn't question it. Why would I? This was Mark, my devoted husband, who'd held my hand through years of fertility treatments. There were small things I noticed but dismissed. New cologne that he said a coworker recommended. Being protective of his phone, taking it into the bathroom when he showered. Working late, even when he wasn't traveling. Joining a gym suddenly after years of avoiding exercise. I told myself I was being paranoid. Pregnancy hormones making me suspicious of nothing. Our baby shower last month was beautiful. Mark's parents flew in from Ohio crying with joy about their first grandchild. My sister Lauren organized everything, transforming our backyard into a wonderland of blue balloons and silver stars. Mark gave a speech about how I'd made him the happiest man alive, how our son would grow up knowing he was loved and wanted more than anything in the world. Everyone said we were the perfect couple. Just last week, lying in bed feeling the baby kick, Mark rubbed my belly and told me he loved me more than ever. He said becoming a father was all he'd ever wanted, that our family was his greatest achievement. He made love to me carefully, tenderly, whispering how beautiful I was carrying his child. I felt so lucky, so completely secure in our life together. How wrong I was. That day at the hospital, I'd arrived early for my 28-week checkup. The waiting room was busier than usual, filled with pregnant women at various stages, some with partners, some alone. I was reading a parenting magazine when movement near the entrance caught my eye. A familiar walk, a familiar gesture of running fingers through hair when nervous. Mark. My Mark. But he wasn't alone. A young woman walked beside him, couldn't have been more than 25, with long auburn hair that caught the fluorescent lights. She was beautiful in that effortless way young women often are. And she was pregnant. Very pregnant. Maybe 6 or 7 months along her hand resting on her rounded belly as she walked. I watched frozen as Mark guided her with his hand on her lower back, the same protective gesture he used with me. They approached the obstetrics check-in desk together, and I instinctively ducked behind a large pillar, my heart hammering so hard I thought everyone must hear it. The receptionist smiled at them warmly. I could hear her congratulating them, something about their first baby being such an exciting time. The woman, this stranger carrying what appeared to be my husband's child, laughed and said they'd been waiting for this for so long. Mark was filling out paperwork, and I saw him write something before handing the clipboard back. When the receptionist asked for his insurance card, he pulled out his wallet, the one I'd bought him for Christmas 2 years ago. The woman called him honey. That single word hit me like a physical blow. Honey. She called my husband honey, not in a casual, friendly way, in the way I called him honey. Intimate, familiar, possessive. She mentioned something about their apartment in Portland needing more space once the baby arrived. Their apartment. In Portland. Where he'd been traveling for work. My legs started shaking. I gripped the pillar to keep from collapsing. Nausea rolled through me, and not the morning sickness kind I'd grown used to. This was different. This was my entire world tilting off its axis. I pressed my hand to my mouth to keep from vomiting right there in the waiting room. My baby kicked as if sensing my distress. 8 months. He'd been going to Portland for 8 months, right around when this woman would have gotten pregnant. While I was injecting myself with hormones, going through retrieval surgery, praying for our embryo to implant, he was sleeping with her, creating a baby the old-fashioned way while I suffered through IVF. I forced myself to look at her more closely. She wore an engagement ring, a solitaire diamond bigger than mine catching the light as she gestured. She was showing the receptionist something on her phone, both of them smiling. Wedding photos, baby bump, progress pictures. When the nurse called them back, she used a name that made my blood run cold. Mr. and Mrs. Walker. Walker was Mark's last name. Our last name. The name I'd taken when we married 7 years ago. This woman was using my name. They walked toward the ultrasound rooms, Mark's hand still on her back. She leaned into him, comfortable and trusting. The way I leaned into him. They looked like any other happy, expectant couple. No one watching would suspect anything was wrong. But everything was wrong. Everything was a lie. I stood there for a full minute after they disappeared down the hallway, trying to process what I'd seen. Part of me wanted to run to pretend I hadn't seen anything, to go home and wait for Mark to return from his supposed business trip with some explanation that would make this all make sense. But I couldn't move. My feet felt rooted to the spot. My hand went to my own belly where our son Mark's legitimate son was growing. How could he do this? How could he create two babies with two different women at virtually the same time? I thought about all those nights alone while he was in Portland. All those times he'd said he missed me, wished he could be home for my doctor's appointments. Was he at her appointments instead? Did he see her ultrasounds while missing mine? Did he feel her baby kick for the first time while I experienced mine alone? The rage started building, replacing the shock. This wasn't some affair, some momentary lapse in judgment. This was a complete double life. This woman thought she was Mrs. Walker. She was here for an obstetric appointment as his wife. How was that even possible? I made a decision. I wasn't going to run. I wasn't going to hide. I was going to wait right here and confront them when they came out. But first, I needed to be smart about this. I canceled my own appointment with a quick text to the office. Then I found a chair with a clear view of the hallway they'd gone down. My hands shook as I pulled out my phone and started documenting. Screenshots of Mark's supposed work calendar showing he was in Portland. Our joint bank statements showing mysterious charges in Portland. The hotel receipts he'd submitted to me for tax purposes. 40 minutes. That's how long I sat there, my mind racing through 7 years of marriage, looking for signs I'd missed. Were there other women, other lies? Was anything about our life together real? During those 40 minutes of waiting, I called Lauren, my younger sister, the one person who would drop everything to help me. She answered on the second ring, and I could barely get the words out. Mark was here, with another pregnant woman. They were married, or at least she thought they were married. Lauren swore so colorfully I actually almost laughed despite everything. She said she was leaving work immediately, would be at the hospital in 20 minutes. She told me not to do anything crazy until she arrived, but I told her I needed to confront them. I needed answers. She made me promise to wait for her in the lobby, at least to have backup when the truth came out. While waiting, I did more research on my phone. Mark's LinkedIn showed him employed at his Seattle company, no mention of Portland offices or transfers. His Facebook, which I rarely checked anymore, had no photos of him from the past 8 months, except the ones I'd tagged him in. But there was something strange. A second profile. Mark J. Walker instead of Mark James Walker. Private locked down, but the profile picture was definitely him. My investigation was interrupted when I saw them emerging from the hallway. They were looking at ultrasound pictures together, Mark pointing at something on the grainy black and white image. The woman, this other Mrs. Walker, was glowing with happiness. She looked up at him with such adoration it made my stomach turn. Then she saw me. Our eyes met across the waiting room. Hers were green, bright with joy that quickly shifted to confusion. She didn't know who I was, of course. Just another pregnant woman in a waiting room full of pregnant women. But she must have noticed I was staring, that my face was probably showing every emotion coursing through me. Mark followed her gaze. When he saw me, the color drained from his face so fast, I thought he might faint. The ultrasound pictures fluttered from his hand to the floor. His mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. For a moment, nobody moved. I stood up slowly, my hand on my belly, and walked toward them. Each step felt like walking through quicksand. Other patients looked up from their phones and magazines, sensing drama unfolding. The receptionist stopped typing, watching us with growing concern. When I reached them, I forced myself to speak calmly, clearly. My voice didn't even shake when I said the words that would destroy 3 lives in an instant. I looked at the woman, first this innocent victim who had no idea what was coming. Then I turned to Mark and said simply, "I'm Jeanette, his wife, his actual legal wife of 7 years." "And you are?" The woman laughed. It was nervous, confused. She thought I was joking. Some crazy woman approaching them with wild claims. She looked at Mark, waiting for him to laugh too, to explain this strange encounter. But Mark wasn't laughing. Mark looked like he was going to be sick. Her name was Brittany. She told me this in a voice growing increasingly uncertain. She said there must be some mistake. She was Mrs. Walker. They'd been married for 6 months. She actually pulled out her phone to show me like I was the one who needed proof. I pulled out my phone too. 7 years of photos. Our wedding album digitized and saved in the cloud. Photo after photo of Mark and me. Vacations, holidays, family gatherings. Our marriage certificate from Washington State. My driver's license showing my legal name, Jeanette Walker. Brittany's legs gave out. Mark tried to catch her, but I stepped between them. "Don't touch her," I said. "Don't touch either of us." A nurse rushed over with a wheelchair, got Brittany seated, started taking her pulse. Her breathing was rapid, panicked. She kept saying no, no, no over and over. Security arrived, drawn by the commotion. The head of security, a large man with kind eyes, suggested we move this conversation somewhere private. But I wasn't done. Not yet. I announced to the entire waiting room that this man, Mark Walker, had married 2 women. He'd gotten both of us pregnant at the same time. He was a bigamist and a liar. The gasps from other patients were audible. Someone was definitely recording on their phone. Good, I thought. Let the whole world see what kind of man Mark Walker really was. Brittany found her voice again. She turned to Mark, demanding answers. How could I be his wife? She was his wife. They had a marriage certificate. They had an apartment. They were having a baby. Her voice rose with each statement until she was almost screaming. Mark tried to speak, but what could he say? There was no explanation that would make this okay. He mumbled something about loving us both, about not meaning for this to happen. Brittany slapped him. The sound echoed through the waiting room. Then she burst into tears, horrible body-shaking sobs that made other pregnant women in the room start crying too. I felt strangely calm. The initial shock had worn off, replaced by cold clarity. I looked at Mark, this man I'd loved for 8 years, and felt nothing. He was a stranger. Had always been a stranger, apparently. When Brittany finally stopped sobbing enough to speak, she revealed the depth of Mark's deception. In Portland, he'd told her he was an orphan. Parents died in a car accident when he was 20. No siblings. No extended family. That's why their wedding was so small, just a few of his friends from college. Except I'd just been at his parents' house for Thanksgiving. His very alive parents who were eagerly awaiting their first grandchild. My child. The mathematics of the betrayal were staggering. Brittany was 26 weeks pregnant. I was 28 weeks. Our due dates were 2 weeks apart. While I was going through egg retrieval, he was trying to conceive with her. While I was having embryos transferred, he was attending her first prenatal appointments. While I was announcing our pregnancy to our families, he was proposing to her. How did you have time? I asked him. The logistics alone seemed impossible. 2 wives, 2 homes, 2 pregnancies to attend to. The Portland trips were explained now, but how did he manage the day-to-day deception company resources he finally admitted? He'd been using his corporate credit card for travel, claiming client meetings that didn't exist. He'd created fake expense reports. The company was paying for his double life. He worked remotely most days, telling me he was at the office while he video called into meetings from Portland. The new cologne was her favorite. The gym membership was because she was into fitness. Every lie led to another lie, a spider web of deception so complex, I wondered how he kept it all straight. Lauren arrived, then bursting through the hospital doors like an avenging angel. She took one look at the scene and wrapped her arms around me. Then she turned to Mark and said things I won't repeat, but several people applauded. The hospital administration moved us all to a family consultation room away from the growing crowd of onlookers. A social worker joined us, a middle-aged woman who'd probably seen everything but still looked shocked by our situation. Brittany and I sat on opposite sides of the room, both of us staring at Mark, like he was something toxic. Lauren held my hand while the truth continued to unravel. Mark's elaborate deception was actually quite impressive in its scope if it hadn't been so devastating. He'd created an entirely different identity in Portland. Mark J. Walker instead of Mark James Walker. Different social media profiles. Different friend groups. He'd hired actors to play groomsmen at his wedding to Brittany. Actual actors from a talent agency paid to pretend to be his college buddies. Brittany showed us photos from their wedding on her phone. It was beautiful, intimate in a rose garden in Portland. Mark wore a different suit than he'd worn to our wedding, but the same expression of joy on his face, the same tears when she walked down the aisle. Did he use the same vows? I wondered. The same promises of eternal devotion. She showed us their apartment. A loft in Pearl District, trendy and modern. Nothing like our traditional house in the suburbs. There were photos of them decorating a nursery there too. Different color scheme, ocean-themed instead of safari, but the same dedication to creating a perfect space for a baby. 2 complete lives. 2 pregnant wives. 2 nurseries waiting for 2 babies who would be half-siblings born 2 weeks apart. The social worker asked gentle questions, trying to understand the legal ramifications. Mark and I were legally married in Washington state. His marriage to Brittany in Oregon was therefore invalid, void from the beginning. She wasn't actually Mrs. Walker. She'd never been Mrs. Walker. Their marriage certificate wasn't worth the paper it was printed on. Brittany started hyperventilating again when she understood this. 6 months of marriage that didn't exist. A wedding that meant nothing. She wasn't his wife. She was just his pregnant mistress, except she didn't even know she was a mistress. She was as much a victim as I was. Mark tried to explain himself, but every word made it worse. He said he'd fallen in love with Brittany during a legitimate business trip to Portland. He hadn't meant for it to happen. But instead of choosing between us, he decided he could have both. He loved both of us. Wanted families with both of us. Thought he could maintain this forever. Forever, I asked. How did he think this would work when the babies were born, when child support documents were filed, when taxes were due, when his parents wanted to meet their grandchild, but there were 2 grandchildren? He didn't have answers. He'd been living moment to moment, crisis to crisis, apparently hoping the universe would somehow make this sustainable. The entitlement of it, the narcissism, was breathtaking. I pulled up Mark's mother's contact on my phone and called her on speaker. She answered cheerfully, asking about the baby, whether I needed anything for the nursery. I told her she needed to know something. Then I explained everything. Her son had committed bigamy. He had another pregnant wife in Portland. She was going to have 2 grandchildren from 2 different women. The silence on the other end lasted so long I thought the call had dropped. Then she started screaming at Mark. Decades of good parenting, of Sunday school and moral values, and this is what he'd become: a liar. A criminal, because yes, bigamy was a crime. A felony in many states. Brittany called her parents in Texas next. Her father's rage was volcanic. He said he was getting on the next flight to Seattle. He had some things to say to Mark in person with his fists. The social worker quickly intervened, suggesting that threats of violence wouldn't help anyone. Through all of this, I kept my hand on my belly, feeling my son move. This innocent baby, who would be born into such chaos. Who would grow up knowing his father was capable of such deception? Who would have a half-sibling the same age born to another woman his father had betrayed? The hospital administrator joined us to discuss the immediate concerns. Both Brittany and I were patients here. Mark was listed as emergency contact and support person for both of us. That would need to be changed immediately. They suggested we might want to deliver at different hospitals to avoid complications during labor and delivery. The social worker provided resources for both of us. Counseling services for betrayal trauma, legal aid for divorce and custody proceedings, support groups for women who'd been deceived by partners. She said she'd never seen a case quite like this where both women were pregnant simultaneously, both believing they were legally married. Mark was escorted from the hospital by security and told not to return to the maternity ward without explicit permission from either of us. As they led him away, he looked back at me with tears in his eyes. "I love you," he said. "Both of you. I'm so sorry." I felt nothing. The man I'd loved was gone. Maybe he'd never existed. This person wearing Mark's face was a stranger who'd stolen 7 years of my life. Lauren drove me home in silence. I couldn't speak. couldn't cry, could barely breathe. The reality of what I discovered was too enormous to process. My entire life had been built on a foundation of lies. Every memory from the past 8 months was tainted. Every "I love you," every promise, every moment of happiness about our growing family was false. When we arrived at my house, our house Mark's car was in the driveway. Lauren wanted to call the police, but I needed to face him one more time. I needed to get things from the house: evidence, documentation, proof of his deception for the divorce that was definitely coming. He was in the living room, sitting on our couch, head in his hands. He looked up when we entered, his face ravaged by tears. He started to speak, but I held up my hand. I didn't want to hear his excuses. I just wanted him gone. I went straight to his home office. Lauren stood guard, making sure he didn't follow me. I found what I was looking for quickly: a second laptop I'd never seen before. When I opened it, the password prompt appeared. I tried Brittany's name. It worked. The computer contained his entire second life: emails with Brittany going back 10 months. He'd pursued her aggressively while I was doing IVF. Love letters sent while I was recovering from egg retrieval. Plans for their future made while I was waiting to see if our embryo would implant. Credit card statements for cards I didn't know existed. The engagement ring he'd bought her cost twice what mine had. Paid for with a cash advance from our joint savings account listed as a medical expense. The apartment lease in Portland signed the week after we found out I was pregnant. Their wedding photographer's invoice paid with money he'd told me was for a new server system for his work. I found his work emails too. The Portland office had never requested his presence. He'd been lying to his employer too, filing false expense reports claiming client meetings that never happened. He'd stolen thousands of dollars from the company to fund his double life. I took photos of everything: screenshots, documents, receipts. Lauren helped me pack his clothes into garbage bags. We changed the locks, calling an emergency locksmith who arrived within an hour. While we waited, I posted on social media a simple statement: Mark and I were separating due to his infidelity and deception. The comments started immediately. Friends expressing shock and support. Then Mark's coworkers started reaching out privately. They'd suspected something was off. He'd been taking excessive time off, claiming family emergencies. His productivity had plummeted. He'd missed important meetings, saying he was sick when they knew he was traveling. One colleague admitted she'd seen him in Portland with Brittany months ago, but assumed I knew that maybe we had an open marriage or were separated. By evening, the story had spread through his entire company. His boss called me directly, apologizing for what I was going through and assuring me they would be investigating the expense fraud. Mark would definitely be terminated. They might press criminal charges for embezzlement. Brittany texted me that night. She was still in the hospital, being monitored for stress-related complications. Her blood pressure was dangerously high. The baby was showing signs of distress. She might need to be admitted for the remainder of her pregnancy. Despite everything, I felt sorry for her. We were both victims, both betrayed, both carrying the children of a man who didn't deserve either of us. I texted back, offering support if she needed it. Strange as it was, I understood what she was going through better than anyone else could. She responded immediately. Could we meet? When she was released from the hospital, she had no one in Seattle. Her parents couldn't fly up immediately. She was alone, pregnant, and devastated. Just like me. I agreed. Because in a twisted way, she was the only person who truly understood the depth of this betrayal. We'd both been played by the same man in the same way at the same time. We were sisters in deception, bonded by the very thing that should have made us enemies. Mark texted both of us constantly. Apologies, explanations, declarations of love. We both blocked him. But he found ways around it: new phone numbers, email addresses, even sending physical letters by courier. Each message was more desperate than the last. He was staying in a motel, he said. He'd lost everything: his job, his family's, his future. Good, I thought. Let him taste the devastation he'd served to us. A week passed in a blur of lawyer consultations and medical appointments. My attorney was aggressive, experienced in high-conflict divorces. She said Mark's bigamy and fraud gave us incredible leverage. I could take everything: the house, the savings, full custody of our child. He'd be lucky if he got supervised visitation. The criminal aspects were more complex. Bigamy was indeed a felony punishable by up to 5 years in prison in Washington state. The fraud charges from his employer could add more years. Did I want to be responsible for sending the father of my child to prison? I didn't know. I didn't know anything anymore except that my son needed to be protected from the chaos his father had created. 2 weeks after the hospital confrontation, Brittany and I met at a coffee shop in downtown Seattle. She looked exhausted, hollow-eyed, her pregnancy glow completely extinguished. We sat across from each other, two heavily pregnant women brought together by the worst kind of circumstances. She told me her story from the beginning. How Mark had approached her at a bookstore in Portland, charming and persistent. How he'd courted her with romantic gestures and constant attention. How he'd proposed after just 4 months, saying he knew she was the one. How they'd tried for a baby immediately, both wanting to start a family. Every detail was like listening to my own story with different settings. He'd used the same lines, the same moves, the same promises. We compared notes like detectives working a case. His favorite restaurants in both cities. The excuses he used for his absences. The gifts he gave for apologies. It was all scripted, calculated, repeated. We discovered he'd been planning this for over a year. He'd started researching Portland apartments before he ever met Brittany. He'd been looking for someone like her, young and trusting, eager for marriage and family. He'd targeted her specifically, studying her social media, learning her routines, engineering their meeting at the bookstore. The sociopathy of it was chilling. This wasn't a crime of passion or a mistake that spiraled out of control. This was premeditated, calculated deception on a massive scale. He'd wanted 2 families, 2 wives, 2 lives, and he'd almost succeeded. We decided to work together, pool our resources, share evidence, ensure he faced consequences for what he'd done. Brittany's marriage might have been void, but she still had rights. The baby was his, proven by DNA testing she'd already arranged. He would owe child support, would have legal obligations. We met with both our attorneys together, an unusual arrangement that raised eyebrows. But our cases were intertwined. My divorce proceedings would affect her custody arrangement. Her fraud claims would support my financial demands. Together we were stronger than apart. The media caught wind of the story. Seattle's 2-timing tech bro became a viral sensation. Mark's photo was everywhere, shared with warnings about deceptive partners. Dating apps started using our story as a cautionary tale about the importance of background checks. True crime podcasts wanted interviews. We declined most requests, but we did start a blog together. The Other Wife, we called it. Writing about our experience, warning signs we'd missed, resources for women who'd been deceived. The response was overwhelming. Hundreds of women wrote to us with their own stories of betrayal and deception. We'd accidentally become experts in relationship fraud. Mark lost his job officially after the company's investigation concluded. He'd embezzled over $50,000 through false expense reports. Criminal charges were filed. His professional reputation in the tech community was destroyed. No company would hire him now, not with his name returning those search results. His parents disowned him publicly. His mother wrote a letter to both Brittany and me apologizing for raising such a deceitful son. She wanted to be in her grandchildren's lives if we would allow it. She understood if we couldn't bear it, but she wanted us to know she supported us, not him. 3 months after Discovery Day, both of us went into labor within days of each other. The cosmic timing felt like one final twist of the knife. Brittany delivered first, a healthy baby girl she named Grace. I delivered Lucas 2 days later, 3 rooms down from where she was recovering. The nurses who knew our story were incredibly kind, making sure we didn't accidentally encounter each other during vulnerable moments. But we did meet intentionally before leaving the hospital. Two exhausted new mothers with babies who looked startlingly similar. They had their father's eyes, both of them. That same shade of brown I'd once found so warm and trustworthy. Would I ever be able to look at my son without seeing his father's betrayal? Mark wasn't at either birth. The restraining orders prevented him from entering the maternity ward. He found out about his children through official notifications from our attorneys. He petitioned for visitation rights immediately, but the judge reviewing the circumstances and criminal charges granted only supervised visitation once a month, pending the outcome of his criminal trial. 6 months have passed now since that day in the hospital. Lucas is 3 months old, beautiful and innocent, unaware of the circumstances of his existence. He smiles at me every morning, and in those moments, I forget about Mark entirely. This child is mine, only mine in every way that matters. Brittany moved back to Texas when Grace was 6 weeks old. Her parents helped her buy a small house near them. She's working as a paralegal now, specializing in family law. She helps women navigate divorces, particularly those involving deception and hidden assets. She's found purpose in her pain, turning her experience into expertise that helps others. We stay in touch through video calls, letting our children see each other. They're half-siblings after all, connected by biology despite the chaos of their origins. Someday we'll have to explain their unusual family structure, but for now they're just babies who look remarkably alike, cooing at each other through screens. Mark is awaiting trial on multiple charges: bigamy, fraud, embezzlement. His attorney reached out about a plea deal, but both Brittany and I refused to support any reduction in charges. He made his choices. He can face the consequences. He sees the children once a month at a supervised visitation center. I drop Lucas off and leave immediately. I've never spoken to Mark since that day I changed the locks. The supervisor tells me he cries through most of the visits holding Lucas and apologizing to him for everything he's lost. I feel nothing when I hear this. The Mark I loved never existed. This man is a stranger who happens to share DNA with my son. I started my own consulting firm using the divorce settlement as startup capital. The judge awarded me the house, the savings, everything except Mark's personal belongings and his car. I sold the house, though. Too many memories, all of them tainted now. Lucas and I live in a smaller place closer to my sister, surrounded by people who actually love us. The business is thriving. Turns out my story gives me credibility in unexpected ways. Clients trust someone who's been through devastation and rebuilt. They know I understand starting over, creating something from nothing, finding strength in unexpected places. I've started dating again carefully. A single father I met at Lucas's daycare. He's kind, transparent to a fault, shares his phone password on the second date as a joke that wasn't really a joke. He understands trust has to be earned slowly, rebuilt carefully. His ex cheated too, though nothing as elaborate as Mark's deception. We take things one day at a time, both of us carrying baggage but willing to help each other unpack it. Brittany found someone too, another attorney at her firm. He knew her story before they ever went on a date, had read our blog, admired her strength. He's never been married, wants children, doesn't mind that Grace exists. He says she's part of Brittany's story, and he loves all of her story, even the painful parts. The blog has become something bigger than we expected. We've written a book proposal. Publishers are interested. Movie producers have reached out. Our story of betrayal and redemption resonates with people. Not because the deception was so elaborate, though it was, but because of how we responded, how we refused to be victims, how we found sisterhood in the strangest circumstances. Mark will likely serve 3 to 5 years in prison. His children will be in elementary school when he gets out. They'll have lives, routine, stability that doesn't include him. He'll be a stranger who visits, sometimes sends birthday cards, pays child support from whatever job he can find as a convicted felon. Sometimes I wonder if he thinks it was worth it. The thrill of deception, the excitement of living multiple lives, the narcissistic pleasure of being wanted by 2 women. Was that temporary high worth losing everything, worth missing his children's first steps, first words, first days of school? I don't hate him anymore. Hate takes energy I need for better things. I pity him. He had everything most people dream of: a loving wife, a beautiful home, a baby on the way, a successful career. It wasn't enough. He wanted more, and in reaching for it, he lost it all. The lesson I've learned isn't about trust, though. I'm certainly more careful now. It's about resilience, about finding strength in the most devastating circumstances, about building something beautiful from the ashes of destruction, about choosing to rise when falling would be easier. I watch Lucas sleeping sometimes, his perfect face peaceful and unmarked by knowledge of his father's sins. I promise him he'll know he's loved, wanted, chosen every single day. He'll know his worth isn't determined by his father's failures. He'll know his mother is strong enough for both of us. My marriage to Mark was built on lies, but my life after him is built on truth. Hard, painful, liberating truth. I know who I am now in a way I never did before. I'm not Mark's wife. I'm not a victim of his deception. I'm Jeanette, single mother, business owner, survivor, thriver. Brittany and I sometimes joke that Mark actually did us a favor. Without his betrayal, we'd never have met, never have discovered our own strength, never have built the lives we have now, lives that are authentically ours. We wouldn't wish this journey on anyone, but we're grateful for where it's led us. In the end, Mark wanted 2 families and ended up with none. We wanted faithful partners and ended up with something better: ourselves. Complete, whole, unbroken, despite everything. Raising children who will know their worth isn't dependent on anyone else's validation. Building futures that don't require permission or approval from partners who don't deserve us. The other day, someone asked me if I believe in happy endings. I said yes, but not the kind in fairy tales. Real happy endings aren't about princes or perfect marriages or living happily ever after with someone else. They're about learning to live happily ever after with yourself. About finding peace in chaos, strength in struggle, hope in heartbreak. My happy ending isn't about Mark getting what he deserved, though he did. It's not about finding new love, though. That's been a pleasant surprise. It's about looking in the mirror and liking who I see. A woman who was knocked down and got back up, who was betrayed and refused to become bitter, who was broken and rebuilt herself stronger. If you've made it this far in my story, you probably have your own tale of betrayal or disappointment. Maybe not as dramatic as bigamy and double pregnancies, but painful nonetheless. What would you have done in my situation? How do you rebuild when everything you believed was a lie? I'd love to hear your thoughts and experiences in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please consider subscribing to follow our continued journey. Like this video if you believe in the power of women supporting each other through impossible circumstances. And share it with anyone who needs to know they're not alone in their struggle, that there's life, beautiful and authentic life after betrayal. Thank you for listening to our story. Remember, your worth isn't determined by anyone else's inability to value you. You are enough just as you are, even in your broken places. Especially in your broken places. Those cracks are where the light gets in, where the strength grows, where the real story begins.